Hi, it's Debra Hamilton, and I'm here today with Jeni Waeltz, Dr. Jeni Waeltz. Not only is she a practicing veterinarian, she's a women's leadership coach, and I am so grateful she's giving us time today to tell us why do pets matter to her. Welcome, Jeni.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for having me be a part of your podcast. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Well, we are really, really grateful. You've told me so many interesting things about your journey to veterinary medicine and now your journey as a women's leadership coach in a broad field, but also to some extent in the veterinary field for women in the veterinary space, owners, veterinarians, anyone, as well as outside the veterinary space, because women's leadership is such a broad category that you're helping women succeed in.
Yeah, I am so excited to really just be a success coach for women in general, to go out there and dream big and do big things. I've seen it's just been a year. 2019 was just a year of seeing amazing men leaders changing the veterinary profession, and it really just they were really inspirational to me to go out there and do the same and follow my own passions. And I want to see more women take big risks, go out there, change their own industry, change their own lives, and stop settling for the status quo. So I am in an executive leadership program. I will become a core energy certified professional coach here in March, and I've already started my business. And I am just excited to still practice medicine and share my love for working with animals, but also my bigger love of really helping women step into their own within this 21st century, and especially within, as we enter the 20s, this next decade. I've got two young girls at home. I've got a 4-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. So they are totally my why and inspiration as I look to see where this next, when they're 18 or 26 and they're going out in the world, what it's going to look like for them. But I've also just been inspired by the women in my life, from just my great aunt who lived to be almost 96 and who was an Army veteran, to some of my other aunts. One of my aunt was fashion editor of the Chicago Tribune, and I've just had amazing mentors in my life.
Such great women role models. And also we might add that there's a little guy sitting next to you who may go to sleep and start snoring, and we're just going to hope we hear that, because it is very important when Why Do Pets Matter that we talk about the fact that when pets feel safe, they fall asleep and sometimes snore, especially Frenchies, which
Exactly. I have 2 cats, 2 dogs currently, and I do have a French bulldog who has to follow me everywhere. So if you hear any snoring, I apologize. He just wants to stay close to me, and I can't kick him out of my office.
No, and nor would we want you to. So tell my audience, going back and thinking about why you are where you are right now with respect to animals, why do pets matter to you?
You know what? It's so fascinating because the human-animal bond is one of the things that I'm probably the most passionate about. And it just goes back to me from being that little girl and having her own pet growing up. So I had a cat that we got when I was 6 years old, who lived 1 month after I graduated vet school. So he lived to be 20 and 3 months of age. And that cat was so part of my journey of from growing up to becoming a teenager, to going off to school, to just going through my journey of becoming a veterinarian. And when I look back to think of that journey and just that human-animal bond, is he was with me through every single hard moment. He was with me whenever I was crying or, depressed after my boyfriend broke up with me, whatever those hardships were in my life, he was always there for me. And he was always there for me just for the fun times as well. And it's amazing as I bridge the coaching gap with the veterinary gap, and I see so many others, when they describe who they are, their animals are a part of them. And that's just how it was for me. I've always had animals. We've had bunch of animals at home, from dogs and cats, and I couldn't imagine my life without a pet. And I also couldn't imagine not wanting to to share in the experience that is life without having some form of companion with me.
You know, Jeni, it's so interesting because most of the people who've been on the podcast have had animals that have really affected their lives. Yours was with you from age 6 until you graduated from vet school, which was a little more than 20 years. So that's 26, holy Toledo. And now that you are helping people with that beloved animal, you've recognized the human animal bond. Why do pets matter as you observe clients coming into your practice? Why do pets matter to these people? And are you able to assist them in a way that makes them understand that pets really do matter to you as well?
Yeah, it's so fascinating in terms of why this human animal bond that we have in place. And I feel like pets really do become, in my mind, I do think really become part of the family, and they really do become people's children in one way or the other, whether they have human children or those that don't have human children. And I even think that it becomes even more than just children. I really think that pets become an extension of themselves. When I work with so many women in terms of coaching and helping them tell their own story and become who they are, I do feel like we live in a society where so many people are still afraid to be who they are. And why pets matter is because those are the one area where they could fully be themselves and they are loved unconditionally. In an existential viewpoint, everyone here on earth is wondering, what am I here for and what is my purpose? And having that animal companion by your side, I feel that so many people who don't know what their purpose is, don't have the ability to showcase who they are going through hard times, or even just going through times excelling, that companion animal is by their side the whole time, cheering them on, and they just show up every day as themselves and get that unconditional love. And we need more of that in our society and our world today as a whole.
Well, it really is fascinating the way you put that, because you're right. We all step out the door every morning and we put on our masks, so to speak, because we're supposed to be a veterinarian, a woman's leader. I'm supposed to be a lawyer and a podcaster, and you put that face on. And some of us are trying to be as authentic as we can be. And that's better than the old days when we all just sort of stayed in our box and did what we were supposed to do. But it's interesting that you are absolutely right. When you come home, it's like putting on your comfy pajamas when you see your dogs and cats, because they just accept you for who you are. And even if, you lose your temper and you yell at them for something, garbage eating is one of the things that I tend to yell at my dogs for, because I don't like picking it up after they go through the garbage. But they don't even get mad at you. They're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Couldn't help myself, but that's me. And so they're so authentic. They're really right there helping you recognize the beauty and the importance of being who you are.
Yeah, and that's just it, is that we do put on all these masks every day. We have to go out into the world and wear some form of a mask. And for some, it could be exhausting. For others, they've just kind of adjusted and gotten used to it. But at the end of the day, we all want to come home and just be ourselves. And these animals do become an extension of us and truly allow us to step into just being ourselves, and just allow us to, whatever the day is gone, just allow us to vent, to just have someone to pet, whatever it may be. Your pet is always there for you.
They really are. And they, studies have shown, which any pet owner will say, we didn't really need to do these studies, but they've done the studies, that if you pet your cat or your dog, your heart rate goes down. If you have a cat or a dog and you take a walk, you're a little bit physically more fit. So these animals are not just there to support you during your good times and your hard times, but they really do provide physical and emotional assistance to us. And if you don't like pets, which is okay too, we are going to address that on Why Do Pets Matter as well, because the most disenfranchised people in the universe are people who don't have pets. And there are a lot of reasons why you don't want to have a pet. You could be allergic, you could be afraid, or you just don't think you can give it the time and care, either financially or physically, that you really need to give it. And so not having a pet might be the best thing for you. But for you as a veterinarian, what are your observations about pets, let's say with young families first, and then for older people? Because I think the attention to pets, as with a young family, you're that pet owner, because you're a pet owner with a young family, and then having pets going into your retirement years. A lot of people stop getting pets because they don't want to outlive their pets, but I'm a true believer in you're going to live a better life and a longer life if you keep a pet with you.
Yeah. So let's address each of these first. So young families wanting to get a pet, or already having animals, and then all of a sudden that kid comes along. There's so much skepticism and unknown on, oh, don't do it, it's going to be too hard, or, oh, and there is, unfortunately, we see a lot of young families all of a sudden getting rid of that dog or that cat for whatever comes along. And I mean, that's really hard for me to see as a veterinarian and an animal lover, because I do see them as adoption for life. I mean, I do think that you take on this responsibility of this dog or this cat, and it would, to me, have to be very extenuating circumstances to say that it would not work. And I think a lot of the fears and the misconceptions really does come down to the fact that there is a lot of work that goes into being a pet owner and being a responsible pet owner. But there are also more avenues to providing good training and good behavioral adjustments. And I always think that, I always tell any of my clients, especially when it comes to different behavioral techniques, that the hardest part is never going to be about the dog or the cat, more specifically the dog learning what it needs to be. It's training the owner or those in the environment around the owner. So my Frenchie, who is over here snoring away, I got him when I had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old, and he was a parvo rescue puppy where he would have died if I didn't save his life. And yes, I was crazy to do it, and yes, it was super hard, but that's just some of the good hearts a lot of people in the veterinary field have, is we can't watch these little animals not be able to make it. So he was my little rescue pup, and he does have some aggression issues, and it is something that I work with a veterinary behaviorist on. I've had behaviorists come, or animal trainers come to the house. So it's knowing the resources out there to have it. And I would say, like, that is an extreme case scenario, and I'm, as a medical vet professional, able to know how to handle with that. But most dogs and most cats, they're going to get along just fine with that child. And it is okay giving yourself some grace where, like, they may not get as many walks as they once did before. But they still make really great additions to the family. And most of them do just fine. And most of them adjust and love those little kids. And it's always, I was at a house call the other day, and she was so nervous about her dog when her kid came along. And then all of a sudden now it's been 2.5 years. And everyone's still doing well, and the dog and the kid are best friends now. And studies show that, just from an allergy standpoint and things like that, having pets when kids are really young helps build immunity. It also helps strengthen just their own bond and their own confidence. But how amazing, just thinking to myself with my own little snowball, how amazing is it for a kid to grow up with their own little best friend in the house? So I've also seen cases where, it was the mom's dog or it was the dad's dog, and 3 to 4 years later, it's now the child's dog, because they've grown to love it. If you're thinking about getting an animal, like a dog or a cat, when your kids are little, do your research and find the right breed or find the right shelter to adopt that dog, because it does matter. Each breed has different temperaments, and not every breed is right for young families, especially if there are kids, rambunctious kids, because a lot of the times when things are happening or bites do occur, I don't think it was the dog's fault. I think a lot of times it was us not reading their behavior and their cues of conflict and adjusting beforehand. So that's just a little bit about ways to think of being a responsible pet parent while you have young children. And then even more importantly, when you are elderly and you have a pet, as so many people are afraid of, I don't know how long I'm going to live. I'm afraid to take that bond on. But just as it is such a hard time right now, and depression and suicide rates are really high, I do worry about many elderly people being alone and not having that person there with them. And a companion animal can make a great person for, or, like a great pet to be able to be there for them. And, if you have those fears, there are ways to be smart about it, is then knowing and having in your will. And I mean, Deborah, you obviously would be able to test this more than me. It's just like having plans in place on what to come next if something were bad to happen. Because there are avenues and are other people of, if something were to happen, I know my pet will go here. It's just putting those plans in place beforehand and giving yourself the gift of that companion for however long you're healthy. And surprisingly enough, if it is the right pet and it's not going to be too rambunctious for you or anything like that, it may help keep you healthier longer.
It's so interesting you said that, because I'm going to go back to the kids first, because of course I had the dogs before the kids. Okay. And my husband always said, if the children are allergic to the dogs, we'll have to get rid of the dogs. And I said, no, the kid's worth more on the open market. Please, everyone, don't get mad at me for saying that. It was a joke at the time. However, I would never have gotten rid of the dogs. And I agree with you completely. I think allergies are much less prevalent in kids who grow up with dogs. And the bond that they get and the responsibility that they get, especially as they get older, because you can give them little tasks to do. I mean, all my kids, can grind nails and they can, comb out knots without hurting the dog. It's just these little things that they learn. But my dogs were so incredibly prepared for the baby. Yeah. So when I came home, and I gave classes in this years ago, and maybe I'll start again. When I came home, I had already sent home every single living stitch of clothing that baby wore in the hospital before I got home, so that my husband threw it in the dog room. He said, here, and they're sniffing and they're sniffing. And so when I got home, I said to my husband, I'm not taking the baby in the house. I'm going to see the dogs. And I'm going to say hello to the dogs. I'm going to smell like the baby. I'm going to say hello to the dogs. And then we'll bring the dogs in with the kid, the baby, because this gives them a heads up. What's this new smell? What's it? Oh, this is it. Oh, she seems really happy with this. And you're right. You have to give yourself a break. I loved when you said that. Give yourself a break if you're not walking them 7 times a day. You know what? I work from home. And my dogs in the old days had 4 acres to run on, and they had an in and outdoor that they could use all the time. And not one of them used it unless I was with them. So if you think, that your dog is going to feel really bad not going on 4 walks, well, maybe they'll be a little rambunctious. But if they're with you, they really don't care. So I loved when you talked about kids, and absolutely, I think getting a behaviorist, if you adopt a dog, an older dog or a young older dog from a shelter because you want to adopt and not shop for a breeder, find a rescue or I love the humane societies because they really can help mentor you. If you're getting a dog that's older, they're gonna tell you what they think, and then make sure you put in that they will help mentor you, especially if this is your first dog, because otherwise it's a adoption failure. And just think how bad that makes you feel, right? I mean, it makes you feel bad. And then if you have a kid and it's an adoption failure, oh, then you really feel bad. So it really is important to make sure that you do some pre-planning, as I say. And as far as older people are concerned, I love when you said, Deborah, you know about this, and I broke my ankle with 9 dogs. So I wasn't dead, but I was pretty much incapacitated. And I realized they didn't have a plan in place for my dogs. And so older people are always afraid they're going to fall and they're going to, break something over the dog or whatever. And I said, yeah, that could happen. But the ability to have that companionship you spoke about when the people are home alone, that they get to talk to somebody all the time because they're going to sit there. There might be a treat in the end of listening to the story, but animals are always going to make you verbal. They're going to make you get up and move. So if you want to keep a pet, think about adopting a senior pet, which are always the hardest to adopt out of a shelter, and just make a written plan. You know, make sure that whatever plan you put in place is written down. And most people go, I've spoken to a number of the over 50 places where they allow you to get that 20-pound dog, right? Which of course I'm trying to see if I can ever get my Irish setters down to 20. I don't think so.
Not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen. And you know, I can't really live without one, so I guess I won't be living in those facilities. But I said, well, do you take the dog to the park? And they go, yeah. I said, does the dog play with anybody at the park? And they go, yeah. I said, why don't you ask them if something happened to you, if they would take the dog, because clearly your dog gets along with their dog. Maybe they won't, but they could. And then you as a veterinarian know there are a lot of vet techs and people who could at least foster the dog. Say I got sick and I needed to go to the hospital, they could maybe foster the dog. Or there are people who come to the vet clinic all the time and say, listen, I'm a dog walker, I'm this, I'm that. There would be people who you could put people in touch with, and because you don't need it right away, you don't look for it.
Yeah.
But if you want to keep a pet in your life, you need to look for it, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's just having a proactive plan in place. And like I said, I do 1 day a week, I do house calls. And so it's not even, it's nowadays, the house call industry is growing. You could have your veterinarian come to your house for your preventative care or your blood work or whatever you need to be if you have trouble getting out of that house or whatever. So there's so many opportunities for you to still have that pet. Again, it's making sure it is the right pet for you. You know, I wouldn't suggest a rambunctious German Shepherd or something for if you're an older lady or something like that. But there are perfect companions for you, and it's just having, and it's very scary to know, okay, what's going to happen when my pet dies, or if I die before my pet, because you love them so much. But having plans in place, knowing that they could go to a good home or a good environment is still a possibility. So don't give up that dream if that's still something you wish.
Absolutely, because if you want, so you have a Frenchie, and if you were older, but you're not, and you were trying to figure out what to do with your Frenchie, every single national breed club in the United States has a rescue. So you can always just call them up and say, hi, I'd like to know who the rescue coordinator is in my area. Get in touch with them and say, listen, I'd really like to be able to leave my dog to you if the people who I appointed can't take the dog. So you might call the vet tech, or you might have a neighbor who loves your dog and will take it from you, or your family. I always laugh because people say, well, my daughter will take the dog. And I've had so many cases where, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, the family can't take the dog. And then the dog ends up and they've assured their mother or father that they will take the dog. But then when the mother or father passes, they're not. So I always say redundancy is key.
Having multiple plans.
I have a friend, Yvonne, who said that to me at a program that I give called the MAP plan, which is navigating the journey your pet takes when you can't care for it. So that's for you as well as older people like myself, because you don't have a crystal ball. And she said, well, my daughter will take it. And I said, okay, just make sure you write that down so everybody knows. And she called me a week later, and I thought this was brilliant. And you know about, because we all have guilt sometimes for things. She said, I want to put the plan together. And I said, what changed your mind? And she said, I want to let her know that there are other people who I would be happy to have my dogs if in fact it doesn't work out. So you take that guilt off your children. If in fact they can't take your pet, I'll have Jenny, I'll have Sue, I'll have Mary. And just remember that if you can't, Jenny said she would, and Mary said she would, and Sue said she would, so check with them. And that way, the kids really don't have that guilt trip of taking. I mean, you've probably met several people in your practice, love to hear a story or two, who've taken their old aunt's cat or their old uncle's dog. And it was like a nightmare because the dog had lived with an old person for a while, and now it's with rambunctious kids, but they felt they had to.
Yeah, so I mean that happens often. I've had anything from neighbors take on a pet once their neighbor had passed away, or even daughters or sons take on. And what I find the most fascinating or the most troublesome is that those animals, because obviously maybe that person was not able to get to move around and go out a lot, is that there's a lack of medical history during whatever that time period, that 3 or 4 years. So again, because mobile veterinary services are growing, you know, there are so many different avenues for you to still get those records. And so it's trying to keep up and get back to like, okay, a lot of times they have gained a little weight because they've been getting too many treats and things like that. And it's trying to get them just on good health, get caught up with their vaccines, taking their baseline blood work and making sure there's no disease presence. And to me, the most concerning or worrisome cases where I do think family members do need to step up earlier is when you do have a family member who is starting to go through dementia or starting to have Alzheimer's. And that is one of the hardest times to be able to say, I don't think you care for this animal anymore. But I think we owe it to that animal to be able to say, this is not a good home anymore, and then stepping up earlier to then move them out of the home, because we do see some cases like that, and then it gets to be a little bit of neglect, and those are the hard cases because they aren't remembering to feed that animal, or they're definitely overfeeding that animal. But that transition period can be a little rough, and the pet may kind of either go through like a honeymoon period or a fear period where things are going well. In that part, it's so important to have that relationship with your current veterinarian or with the veterinarian they were going there, that they were seeing, to just make sure that that pet is off to the best start possible in its new home.
Absolutely. So working with your veterinarian is key, because the veterinarian is going to possibly see that your mother or dad are not taking care of the dog, even though they're bringing it to the vet. It may be the beginnings of a dementia or Alzheimer's, and you really need to check in with the veterinarian as, you know, the children of elderly pet owners. But also, if you are young and have lots of kids, I'm sitting here thinking mobile vets are like perfect, because you don't have to move your dog. You know, the kids are napping. Can you come over now? That'd be great. We won't, you know, we'll take care of the dogs. I won't have to leave. I won't have to pack everybody up in the car. How great is that? So it's this flexibility that now is surrounding animal ownership. And also, I always say that, you know, if you have a dog and something happens to you, sometimes people have put in their will that they want the dog put to sleep, because they don't think anybody can care for the dog as well as they can. So they want the dog put to sleep, no matter the condition of the dog when they pass. And, you know, I really hold a safe space for people, because they really truly feel that the dog can't be cared for by anybody else but them. And then if you can enable them and empower them to check into and to, you know, to really reality check that decision. Because there are people who will come in while you're there and you're, you know, you're getting older, and maybe they'll come take the dog for a walk because you can't take the dog for a walk anymore. And so the dog is gently bonding with that person because they're taking it for a walk so it won't get fat. And then understanding that that person would probably either be the best person to take the dog when you can't care for it any longer, or maybe care for it, and you can still keep it, but you don't have to care for it. You know, it could be a therapy dog at that point. We could get it certified as a therapy dog so it could come and visit you, but that it would live with the other person. I mean, there are so many ideas and things to do now. Cottage industries that have opened up. Dog taxis. I mean, if you're in a rural area, maybe not as many cottage industries, but then you could start one to help people, older people, keep their pets, and also to be able to take the pets to and from the vet, or have the vet come to you. It's just, it's so exciting. You know, why do pets matter? Because everybody who has a pet has an idea of how that pet should live with them. And we're here to facilitate that. I think you feel that more strongly than anyone. I'm here to not only facilitate how to help you, because I'm a mobile vet as well as a relief vet, but I'm also helping other people in the veterinary field, women, be leaders, and this is something they could consider.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the biggest thing, that as a mobile veterinarian, as veterinary who's practiced for so many years, and we've talked a little bit, you just kind of were mentioning like euthanasia and things like that, is if there's one thing animals show us, is that how fleeting life is. We only get these pets for 10, 20 years, in my case with my cat, if I'm lucky, and they live their whole lives unconditionally loving their owner, dealing with so much pain that as veterinarians we still struggle to educate pet owners of what pain even looks like for them, and then they're gone in the blink of an eye. And if there's one thing we can learn about them, from them, and how much they matter, is how short life really is. And we only get this one life to live on earth. And so that really was kind of, they're also inspiration for me just starting this coaching journey in terms of speaking up and being yourself and going out there and achieving those big dreams and goals that you may have. It's just so important and so needed, because it's only this one life you get. As veterinarians, we deal with so much euthanasia, and it really can be hard on us as a profession. We're the only profession where we have to help owners make that final decision, and that final decision is so hard for so many people to actually make that decision. And it's a beautiful thing that we have that option for our pets.
It's interesting because for me, one of the things that would be the hardest for me as a veterinarian to deal with is someone not allowing a dog to transition when it should, when it's in pain, or wanting it to transition because they transitioned and it's healthy and happy and it could live a greater life. So those two things, if we can help, why do pets matter? Because they could bring joy and wonder to your family or to your neighbor or to someone the vet had to put a dog to sleep because it was sick, and then there's this older person without a pet who would love your pet.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, I've never had a case, but I've heard of the cases where people do want their pets euthanized. And I know there was a big controversial one not too long ago about a young pet needed to be euthanized after an owner died. And I don't think that's fair to the pet. And I do think that we need to be proactive of looking at who else could care for these these pets, because there are other people out there who are perfectly capable of doing so. And it is looking past our own self and seeing the animal as a whole.
It's a gentle conversation to have, because you're so fearful. You see all of those ads on TV of the starving dogs and the maltreated dogs. And of course, that's where your dog's going to go. Not really. But you don't know that. And so you feel, well, I don't want this to happen. And that's why making a plan, putting it in writing, and making sure you have redundancy and it's published so that people know this is the plan you have is really key. Jeni, we're running out of time. I am so grateful for you to be here. I'd love to have you back again in a few months so that we can carry on this conversation again. We can check in to see how things are going with you. As a final thought, after all of what we said, what is the one concept you'd love all the listeners to take away on why do pets matter?
I just want them to take away the fact that pets are really an opportunity for you to be yourself, and it's one of the greatest ways to build your own stress resiliency plan and your own wellness plan. If you are going into 2020 wanting to be more you, if you're going into 2020 wanting to start taking better care of yourselves, you don't need to look outward at all of the things like the gym to join and the diet to do and the meditation to do. Just go, if you have pets, just prioritize turning the phone off, because just like we're raising a generation where our kids are going to see us on the phone all the time, our pets are feeling the same way too. So put the phone away and go spend some quality time with your pet. If it's a cat, allow yourself to be fully present in the moment while you're just petting that cat or play some toss. And if it's a dog, start taking that dog for a walk more, and you'd be amazed at the weight that slowly comes off of you. So those are just some little tips and tricks where we don't need to look to too many outer forces. If we have our animals in our house now, our wellness plan is just waiting for us to begin, and that includes them.
I know. And it's interesting. My takeaway from all of this is that when you're out there, you can meditate. So I'm not a really good meditator because I never sit still and turn my brain off. But when I'm walking my dogs, I really am present. And I think it's perfect that you said that. Be present. Make sure that you pet your cat with presence, and you walk your dog with presence. I'm always talking to my dogs when I'm walking them, because I'm carrying in a conversation. So what great advice, Jeni. You have a great day, and we'll have you back because this was awesome.
All right. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on, Deborah. It was a pleasure.
And this has been Why Do Pets Matter with Dr. Jeni Waeltz.